Have you ever made a promise to someone you loved? A promise so sacred that you kept it even when it hurt, even when it drained you financially, even when nobody would have blamed you for walking away? I did. For 7 years, I sent my late husband's mother $380 every single month without fail because I loved her son more than life itself, and I thought honoring his memory meant taking care of the woman who gave him life. But what I discovered after all those years, after all those sacrifices, after all that love I poured into keeping my promise, it shattered me in ways I never thought possible. Let me tell you what happened, because this story changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and the promises we make to the people we lose. My name doesn't matter, but my story does. And I'm sharing it through my eyes because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear this. I was 26 years old when I met David. It was one of those chance encounters that romance novels are made of, except this was real, raw, and more beautiful than any fiction could capture. I was working at a small bookstore in downtown Portland, surrounded by the smell of old pages and fresh coffee from the cafe next door. He walked in on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, his dark hair dripping wet because he'd forgotten his umbrella, and he had this smile that made my heart skip in a way I'd never experienced before. He was looking for a specific book, a rare edition of poetry by Pablo Neruda, and I helped him find it tucked away on a high shelf in the back corner of the store. Our fingers touched when I handed it to him, and I swear I felt electricity run through my entire body. We talked for 2 hours that day, sitting on the worn leather chairs in the reading nook, discussing everything from literature to dreams to the meaning of life. He had this way of looking at me, really looking at me, like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. I fell in love with him right there, in that moment, surrounded by thousands of stories, but knowing that ours was just beginning. We got married 14 months later in a small ceremony by the ocean, with the waves crashing behind us and seagulls crying overhead. His mother, Patricia, cried through the entire ceremony, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her only son marry the woman he loved. David was her whole world. His father had left when David was just 3 years old, and Patricia had raised him alone, working 2 jobs to put him through school, sacrificing everything to give him opportunities she never had. She was a strong woman, resilient, with hands weathered from years of hard work, and eyes that held both sorrow and determination. I admired her from the moment I met her. She welcomed me into their small family with open arms, treating me like the daughter she never had, sharing recipes and stories and the kind of maternal love I'd been craving since my own mother passed away when I was 19. We would spend Sunday afternoons at her tiny apartment, the 3 of us, eating her famous pot roast and laughing until our sides hurt. Those were the golden days, the ones I hold on to when the darkness tries to consume me. David worked as an architect, designing buildings that would outlive us all, creating spaces where people would live and love and build their own memories. He was passionate about his work, staying up late sketching designs, his eyes bright with excitement as he showed me his latest project. We talked about our future constantly, about the house we would build together, the children we would have, the life we would create. We had it all planned out. Every detail, every dream carefully constructed like one of his architectural blueprints. We were going to wait 2 more years before starting our family, save up enough money to buy a piece of land outside the city where we could build our dream home, a place with big windows that let in natural light and a garden where our children could play. We were going to grow old together, watching sunsets from our porch, holding hands like we did every single night before falling asleep. But fate, that cruel mistress, had different plans for us. It was a Wednesday morning, ordinary in every way except that it would become the day that divided my life into before and after. David left for work at 7:30, kissing me goodbye like he did every morning, telling me he loved me, reminding me to pick up milk on my way home from the bookstore. I can still feel that kiss, still remember the taste of his coffee-flavored lips, still hear his voice saying those 3 words that I would never hear again. He never made it to his office. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of 5th and Morrison, slamming into the driver's side of David's car at 60 miles per hour. The impact killed him instantly, the police told me later, trying to offer some comfort in the fact that he didn't suffer. But I suffered. Oh God, how I suffered. The call came at 9:15 in the morning. I was shelving books in the poetry section, ironically near the same spot where David and I had first talked, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, a calm voice asked if I was Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, wife of David Mitchell. The world stopped spinning in that moment. Everything went silent. I knew, even before the officer said the words, I knew that my life was over. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and tear-stained faces and condolences that meant nothing because nothing could bring him back. Patricia was inconsolable, wailing with a grief so profound it seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. I held her as she collapsed at the graveside, her body racking with sobs, her fingers clutching at the dirt as if she could dig down and pull her son back to life. I was numb, frozen, unable to cry because if I started, I feared I would never stop. We buried him on a Friday, under gray skies that matched the color of my shattered heart, and when everyone left the cemetery, I stayed behind, sitting next to his grave until the sun went down, and the groundskeeper gently told me it was time to go. I didn't want to leave him there, alone in the cold ground. I wanted to crawl into that grave with him, to be buried alongside the only man I would ever love, but I didn't. I got up, I walked away, and I started the impossible task of learning how to live without him. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I stopped going to work, stopped eating, stopped caring about anything at all. My apartment, the one David and I had shared, felt like a mausoleum, every corner filled with memories that cut like glass. His coffee cup still sat on the counter where he'd left it that last morning. His jacket hung on the hook by the door. His toothbrush stood next to mine in the bathroom. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it, couldn't accept that he was really gone. I would wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him, my hand finding only empty space and cold sheets. The grief was physical, a constant ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe, a weight pressing down on me that made even the simplest tasks feel impossible. Friends came by with food and sympathy, but their words bounced off the wall I'd built around myself. How could they understand? How could anyone understand what it felt like to lose your soulmate at 28 years old, to have your entire future ripped away in a single moment? But then I thought about Patricia. If I was drowning in grief, she was being pulled into an abyss. She had lost her only child, her reason for existing, the person she had sacrificed everything for. I called her 3 weeks after the funeral, and the sound of her voice broke something open inside me. She sounded so lost, so utterly broken. And in that moment, I realized that we needed each other. We were the only two people in the world who truly understood the magnitude of what we had lost. I started visiting her every weekend, and slowly, painfully, we helped each other survive. We would sit in her living room, surrounded by photos of David at every age, and we would talk about him for hours. She told me stories from his childhood, about the time he tried to build a treehouse and fell out of the tree, breaking his arm, or the time he brought home a stray dog and begged her to let him keep it. I told her about our plans, our dreams, the life we were supposed to have together. We cried together, laughed together, and somehow, in our shared grief, we found a way to keep breathing. 6 months after David's death, I went through his papers to settle his estate. He had a small life insurance policy through his work, enough to pay off our car loan and cover the funeral expenses with about $30,000 left over. I knew what I needed to do with that money. Patricia was living on a fixed income, her Social Security barely covering her rent and basic expenses. She was 63 years old, still 3 years away from Medicare, and her part-time job at a grocery store paid minimum wage. David had been helping her financially, sending her money every month, making sure she had enough for her medications and bills. He had never told me the exact amount, but I found the records in his desk drawer, neat and organized like everything else in his life. $380 every single month without fail. It was his way of paying her back for all the sacrifices she had made for him, his way of making sure the woman who gave him everything would be taken care of. I made a decision that day, sitting at David's desk with his bank statement spread out in front of me. I would continue what he had started. I would send Patricia $380 every month, just like David had done, because it was what he would have wanted, because she had lost everything and deserved to be supported, because in taking care of her, I was honoring his memory in the most meaningful way I could. I didn't tell her about the decision at first. I simply set up an automatic transfer from my account to hers, scheduled to go through on the 1st of every month, the same day David had always sent it. The first time the money transferred, I sat on my bathroom floor and cried, feeling closer to David than I had since he died. This was my promise to him, my way of keeping him alive through actions rather than words. Patricia called me the day after the first transfer went through, her voice thick with emotion. She had assumed the money would stop now that David was gone, had been preparing herself to figure out how to make ends meet on her own. When she saw the deposit, she called me immediately, asking if there had been some mistake, if maybe David's employer was still paying out something from his final paycheck. I told her the truth then, told her that I was continuing what David had started, that I wanted to help her the way he had helped her, that she was family and I would take care of her. She cried so hard she could barely speak, thanking me over and over, telling me I didn't have to do this, that she couldn't accept such generosity. But I insisted. I told her it wasn't generosity, it was love, and it was what David would have wanted. She finally accepted, and from that day forward, the $380 went from my account to hers like clockwork, every single month, for 7 years. Those 7 years were not easy for me financially. I was still working at the bookstore, making barely enough to cover my own rent and expenses. The life insurance money was gone within the first year, used to help Patricia with a medical emergency, and to replace her broken refrigerator and to cover 100 other small crises that arise when you're living on the edge of poverty. But I never missed a payment to her, never even considered stopping. I cut back on everything I could. I stopped going out with friends, stopped buying new clothes, learned to make every dollar stretch as far as possible. I ate pasta and rice and whatever was on sale at the grocery store. I took the bus instead of maintaining a car. I gave up my apartment and moved into a tiny studio to save on rent. Every sacrifice felt worth it because I was keeping my promise to David, because I was taking care of the woman who had given me the gift of loving her son. Have you ever loved someone so much that even after they're gone, you'll do anything to honor their memory? That's what this was for me. It wasn't about the money. It was about love, about loyalty, about being the kind of person David had believed I was. Patricia and I grew incredibly close during those years. She became the mother I had lost, and I became the daughter she had always wanted. We talked on the phone every few days, sharing the mundane details of our lives, finding comfort in the connection we maintained. I spent every major holiday with her, cooking meals together in her tiny kitchen, trying to fill the David-shaped hole in both our hearts. She told me repeatedly how grateful she was, how the money I sent made such a difference in her life, how she didn't know what she would do without me. She called me her angel, her blessing, the daughter-in-law that God had sent to save her. Her words filled me with purpose, made me feel like I was doing something meaningful with my grief. Taking care of Patricia gave me a reason to get up in the morning, a way to channel my pain into something positive. She was my connection to David, the living link to the man I had lost, and through helping her, I felt like I was still somehow taking care of him. But there were moments, I'll admit, when the financial strain wore on me. There were months when I had to choose between sending Patricia her money and paying my electric bill on time. There were weeks when I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches because I had literally nothing left after all my bills were paid. There were nights when I lay awake, stressed and anxious, wondering how I was going to make it through another month, another year, another decade of this struggle. My friends, the few who knew about the arrangement, told me I was being foolish, that I had no obligation to support my mother-in-law, that David wouldn't have wanted me to sacrifice my own well-being like this. But they didn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to make a promise to someone you loved more than life itself, and then have to keep that promise after they were gone. This wasn't about obligation. This was about honor, about love that transcended death, about being true to the values that David and I had shared. Years passed. I turned 30, then 32, then 35. I dated occasionally, but nothing ever felt right. How could anyone compare to David? How could I give my heart to someone else when it still belonged to a man in a grave? Patricia would sometimes gently encourage me to move on, to find someone new, telling me that David would want me to be happy. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would never be ready. My life had become a simple routine. Work, pay bills, send money to Patricia, visit her on weekends, go home to my empty studio apartment, and remember what it felt like to be loved. It wasn't much of a life, but it was the one I had chosen, and I accepted it. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon in late September, and I had driven to Patricia's apartment for our usual weekend visit. I had a key to her place, which she'd given me years ago for emergencies, and I let myself in when she didn't answer my knock, assuming she might be in the shower or napping. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and I felt a flutter of concern as I walked through the small living room toward the kitchen. That's when I heard voices, muffled but distinct, coming from the bedroom. Patricia's voice, and another voice, a man's voice that I didn't recognize. My heart started racing. Was she okay? Was someone hurting her? I moved quickly toward the bedroom, my hand reaching for my phone, ready to call 911 if needed. But what I saw when I reached the bedroom doorway stopped me cold. Patricia was sitting on her bed, fully dressed, laughing, her head thrown back in genuine joy. Next to her sat a man I'd never seen before, roughly her age, his hand resting casually on her knee. On the bed between them were stacks of cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place outside of a bank. They were counting it, sorting it into neat piles, and they were so engrossed in their task that they didn't notice me standing there in the doorway, frozen in shock. I must have made some sound, a gasp or a sharp intake of breath, because Patricia's head snapped up and her eyes met mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and I watched as the color drained from her face. The man next to her looked confused, glancing between us, clearly not understanding the situation. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I found my voice first. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My eyes were fixed on the money, thousands of dollars in cash spread across her faded bedspread. "Patricia, what is all this money?" She stood up quickly, her hands fluttering in front of her like nervous birds. "Sarah, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." But even as she said the words, we both knew she was lying. It was exactly what it looked like. I took a step into the room, my legs shaking, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. "How much is there?" I asked, pointing at the money. The man on the bed started gathering up the cash, clearly uncomfortable with my presence. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her in that moment. All I felt was a growing sense of dread, a terrible certainty that everything I thought I knew was about to crumble. "Sarah, please, let me explain," Patricia said again, moving toward me. I took a step back, holding up my hand to stop her. "Just tell me the truth. Where did this money come from?" The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia looked at the man, then back at me, and I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. It was guilt, yes, but also calculation, like she was trying to decide how much to tell me, how much she could get away with hiding. Finally, she spoke, and her words shattered my world. "This is Robert," she said, gesturing to the man on the bed. "He's my partner. We've been together for 5 years." 5 years? The words echoed in my head. 5 years. I had been sending her $380 every single month for 7 years, and for 5 of those years, she had been living with a man, sharing expenses, sharing a life, while I struggled alone, sacrificing everything to support her. "You have a partner?" I repeated slowly, trying to process this information. "You've had a partner for 5 years, and you never told me? You let me keep sending you money every month when you didn't need it?" Patricia's face crumpled. "I did need it, Sarah. We needed it. Robert is on disability, and his checks barely cover anything. The money you sent helped us so much." Helped them. The words rang in my ears. I felt like I was going to be sick. "You have someone helping you, sharing expenses with you, and you still took my money? Money that I could barely afford to send? Money that I sacrificed everything for?" My voice was rising now, all the shock converting into anger, hot and righteous and overwhelming. "You don't understand," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face now. "It's not like that. We barely make it as it is. Your money made such a difference. We were able to afford things we never could have otherwise." "Things like what?" I demanded, looking around the apartment with new eyes. The new television I had assumed was a gift from someone. The updated furniture. The name-brand groceries in the kitchen instead of the generic brands she used to buy. All of it paid for with my money. Money I had sent out of love and loyalty and a promise to a dead man. "How much money is on that bed right now?" I asked, my voice cold and hard. Patricia didn't answer, just looked down at the floor. I turned to Robert, who had been sitting silently through this entire exchange. "How much?" He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "About $8,000. $8,000. I felt dizzy. I reached out to steady myself against the doorframe. "Where did it come from?" Another long silence. Then Patricia spoke, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "We've been saving it. A little bit each month from what you sent, plus Robert's disability check, plus my paycheck. We were going to take a trip, a cruise we've been planning for years." A cruise. A goddamn cruise. I had been eating ramen noodles for dinner and walking to work in the rain to save bus fare, and they had been saving up for a cruise. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I couldn't even speak. I just stood there staring at this woman I had loved, this woman I had sacrificed for, this woman who had called me her angel while lying to me for 5 years. "Get out," Patricia said suddenly, and for a confused moment I thought she was talking to me, but she was looking at Robert. "Please, Robert, give us a minute. Go wait in the living room." He gathered up the money quickly, shoving it into a pillowcase, and hurried out of the room, clearly relieved to escape the confrontation. When he was gone, Patricia turned to me, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Sarah, please, you have to understand. I never meant to hurt you. The money you sent, it was a gift from David's memory, and I treasured it. I treasured you. But I was so lonely after he died, and when I met Robert, he made me feel alive again. I know I should have told you, but I was afraid you would stop sending the money, and we really did need it. We still need it. I stared at her. This woman who had played on my grief, my love, my loyalty for 5 years. You need it for cruises? You need it for new televisions and expensive groceries? Meanwhile, I've been living in a studio apartment the size of your bedroom, wearing the same clothes I bought 7 years ago, working extra shifts just to make sure I never missed a payment to you. Do you have any idea what I've given up? What I've sacrificed? I know, and I'm grateful, Patricia said, reaching for my hands. I pulled away from her like she was poison. I am so grateful for everything you've done. You're like a daughter to me. A daughter you've been lying to for 5 years, I said bitterly. A daughter you've been stealing from. I never stole from you, Patricia protested. You gave me that money willingly. I never asked you for it. You accepted it under false pretenses, I shot back. You let me believe you were alone, struggling, barely making ends meet. You let me sacrifice my own financial security to help you when you didn't need it, not the way I thought you did. That's theft, Patricia. Maybe not legally, but morally. It's theft. She was crying harder now, her whole body shaking with sobs. Please, Sarah, please don't be angry with me. I love you. You're all I have left of David. No, I said firmly. I'm not all you have left. You have Robert. You have a whole life I knew nothing about. And you know what the worst part is? It's not even the money. It's the lies. It's the fact that every time we talked on the phone and you told me how hard things were, you were lying. Every time I visited and you thanked me for helping you survive, you were lying. Every holiday we spent together, every conversation about how much we missed David, all of it was tainted with your deception. That's not true, Patricia insisted. I do miss David. I miss him every single day. And everything I said to you, all the gratitude, all the love, that was real. The money situation doesn't change that. But it did change that. It changed everything. I looked at this woman I had thought I knew, and I realized I didn't know her at all. How could I? She had been playing a role for 5 years, performing the part of the struggling widow while living a completely different life behind closed doors. I need to know something, I said, my voice deadly calm. When did you meet Robert? What month, what year? Patricia hesitated, and in that hesitation I knew the answer was going to hurt. September, 7 years ago. September, 7 years ago. 2 months after David's funeral. She had met him 2 months after losing her son, and by her own admission, they'd been together for 5 years, which meant they'd been in a relationship for 2 years before she told me. 2 years of taking my money while building a new life with someone else. Did you move in together? I asked. She nodded miserably. After about 6 months of dating, he was having trouble with his landlord, and it just made sense financially for us to live together. 6 years. For 6 of the 7 years I'd been sending money, she had been living with a partner, splitting expenses, building a life together, and she had never said a word. I'm done, I said quietly. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only exhaustion and profound sadness. I'm done sending you money. The transfer stops today. Patricia's face went white. Sarah, no, please. You can't. We're depending on that money. We have bills. You have each other, I interrupted. You have Robert's disability check and your paycheck, and clearly, you have $8,000 in savings. You'll be fine. Better than fine, actually, since you'll have $380 more a month from Robert's income that you won't be expecting from me. But what about David? Patricia asked desperately. What about honoring his memory? He would want you to take care of me. That hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't let her see how much it hurt. David would want me to take care of myself, I said. He loved me, and he would be horrified to know that I've been struggling while you've been saving up for cruises. Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate me. You've done enough of that already. I turned to leave, but Patricia grabbed my arm. Please, Sarah, don't go like this. Let's talk about this. We can figure something out. I gently removed her hand from my arm. There's nothing to figure out, Patricia. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I hope you enjoy your cruise. I walked out of that apartment, and I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove. Not to my own apartment, but to the cemetery where David was buried. I hadn't been there in months, maybe longer, because it hurt too much to face his grave, to confront the reality of his absence. But I needed to go there now. I needed to tell him what had happened, needed to ask him if I was doing the right thing. I sat on the grass next to his headstone, not caring that the ground was damp from recent rain, and I talked to him like I used to when he was alive. I told him everything about the money, about Patricia's lies, about Robert and the cruise and the $8,000. I told him how betrayed I felt, how foolish, how used, and then I asked him to forgive me for stopping the payments, for breaking my promise to take care of his mother. But as I sat there in the fading afternoon light, I realized something important. The promise I had made wasn't to keep sending money no matter what. The promise was to honor David's memory by being kind, by being generous, by taking care of someone who needed help. Patricia didn't need my help, not the way I thought she did. She had made that clear. My obligation wasn't to fund her lifestyle or her vacations. My obligation was to live my own life in a way that would make David proud. And that meant taking care of myself, standing up for myself, refusing to be manipulated or used. I spent an hour at the cemetery that day, just sitting with David, feeling closer to him than I had in years. When I finally left, I felt lighter, like I had been carrying an enormous weight and had finally set it down. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it wasn't crushing me anymore. I could breathe again. The next week, I canceled the automatic transfer to Patricia's account. She called me repeatedly, sent me dozens of text messages, even showed up at the bookstore where I worked. I didn't engage with her. I had said everything I needed to say in her bedroom that day. Her betrayal had severed whatever connection we still had, and I needed to move forward without her in my life. As the weeks passed, I started to rebuild. I looked for a better-paying job and found one at a publishing house, doing editorial work that I loved. With the $380 a month that I was no longer sending to Patricia, plus the increase in salary from my new job, I was able to move into a nicer apartment, one with actual space and natural light. I started buying fresh vegetables and cooking real meals. I replaced my worn-out clothes and got a haircut that made me feel like myself again. Small things, but they added up to a life that felt livable, even hopeful. I also started therapy, something I should have done 7 years ago when David died. My therapist helped me understand that my relationship with Patricia had been unhealthy from the start, built on mutual grief and codependency rather than genuine connection. She helped me see that I had been using Patricia as a way to avoid processing my own grief, focusing on taking care of her so I wouldn't have to take care of myself. The money I sent every month wasn't really about Patricia at all. It was about trying to keep David alive by maintaining the patterns he had established. But David was gone, and holding on to those patterns wasn't honoring his memory. It was preventing me from moving forward. 6 months have passed since that terrible day in Patricia's apartment. I haven't spoken to her once in all that time, though she tried to reach out for the first few months. Eventually, the calls and texts stopped. I don't know if she and Robert went on their cruise, and honestly, I don't care. That part of my life is over. I've forgiven her, not because she deserves it, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means releasing the emotional burden and choosing peace over bitterness. I've also forgiven myself for being naive, for trusting too completely, for sacrificing too much. I did what I thought was right at the time, and I can't fault myself for that. I loved David with everything I had, and when he died, I channeled that love into taking care of his mother. My intentions were pure, even if the outcome was painful. I've learned that love and loyalty are beautiful things, but they shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being. You can honor someone's memory without destroying yourself in the process. Recently, I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet, just coffee dates and dinners, getting to know new people and allowing myself to feel attraction and interest without the crushing guilt I used to feel. David will always be my first love, the one who changed me and shaped who I am. But he would want me to be happy, to live fully, to find love again. I know that now. I feel him with me sometimes, especially in quiet moments. And I imagine him smiling, proud of me for finally choosing myself. This experience taught me invaluable lessons about boundaries, about self-worth, about the difference between generosity and self-destruction. It taught me that sometimes the people we trust most are capable of deceiving us, not out of malice necessarily, but out of their own needs and weaknesses. It taught me that grief can make us do irrational things, can cloud our judgment, and make us vulnerable to manipulation. But most importantly, it taught me that I am stronger than I ever knew, capable of surviving not just loss but betrayal, capable of rebuilding my life from the ashes of broken promises and shattered trust. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing my pain and my healing. I'm I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone in having experienced betrayal from someone I loved and trusted. Maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you've sacrificed for someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe you felt that unique pain of realizing the relationship you thought you had was built on lies. If so, I want you to know that it's okay to walk away. It's okay to put yourself first. It's okay to stop sacrificing for people who are taking advantage of your kindness. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted betrayed you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone in our experiences can make all the difference. Please share your thoughts, your experiences, your wisdom. This community is a safe space for all of us to be vulnerable and real with each other. Understanding your own worth and setting healthy boundaries is one of the most important things you can do for your mental and emotional health. If my story resonates with you, if it made you think about your own relationships and whether they're truly reciprocal and healthy, then I've accomplished what I set out to do. We all deserve to be treated with honesty and respect, and we all deserve to surround ourselves with people who genuinely care about our well-being, not just what we can do for them. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something, I would be so grateful if you would leave a like on this video. Your support means the world to me and helps this content reach more people who might need to hear this message. And if you're not already subscribed to Through My Eyes, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. I share real, raw, honest experiences here. Stories that matter. Stories that reflect the complicated reality of being human. We're building a community of people who aren't afraid to be vulnerable, who support each other through the hard times, and who celebrate the victories, no matter how small. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Remember, you are worthy of love, of honesty, of relationships that build you up rather than tear you down. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next video.